Thanks to the FGO roadmap that they put on the NA version of the game, we know that this event is going to be coming out on the 15th, and I thought it'd be very prudent to go ahead and put out this event guide, especially as someone that played it on the JP version. I have a lot of tips and tricks for people to kind of get through some of these lotto nodes. In fact, for this event guide, we're just pretty much going to jump right into it, talking about the lottery stuff, and then we'll kind of go over some of the free-to-play stuff, which is nice that we're going to be getting. You know, there's some decent command codes, there's some nice buffs that are coming our way, but obviously the main thing that we all care about is the lotto. You know, I'm very excited to get into this. Unfortunately, I don't have all that many apples, and so I have some advice revolving around that as well for when you should start jumping into the event if you're still reeling from the past lotto and the raids that we got for Tugunska Sanctuary. But I would say if you have, say, about 100 apples, you can just hit the ground running with the first league and jump right into the 90+ node. Although some people will be asking, well, if I can't do the 90+ node in 3 turns, is it still worth farming? I would say yes, even if it's going to take you 4 to 5 turns, which realistically it shouldn't. I'm going to give you some tips and tricks as someone who wasn't able to do buster farming when this was here on JP because I didn't have Koyanskaya. Obviously, if you have Koyanskaya, you just buster farm all of these things and don't even think about it. But as someone who didn't have that, I had to get a little bit creative in how I would clear these stages to get consistent 3 turns while just having to use Castoria. Now, if you're only stuck with someone like Scotty or you don't have any of the meta supports, you might have to do hard battery farming. Thankfully, the CE that drops the lotto currency has a 30% battery attached to it, and if you max limit break it, if you're very lucky to get extra copies, it goes to a 50% battery. So even worst case scenario, if you have to do just raw battery farming, big battery servants, you still have a little bit of leeway there, especially with a pen skills now also being in the game to give you an extra 10 to 20% NP if you really want to try to tighten up your farming setup. But it is worth going for the 90+ because it not only drops the lotto currency, but it also drops the shop currency. And the shop has pretty decent rewards in there, as always, but if you're someone who's also reeling from the QP struggles of FGO like myself, you can sell the gold currency after you've cleared out the shop for QP, and that can be very helpful in just getting an extra 100 mil, 200 mil QP. So make sure you are trying to do the 90+ nodes. And again, I'm going to walk you guys through it and try to help you guys out in finding some strategies that don't involve buster farming, because obviously if you're going to buster farm these, you just slam your head into the nodes and you don't really think about it. But with that being said, strap in. This video might be a little bit longer because there's a lot to talk about. Make sure you leave a like, subscribe, all the interaction things for the daily FGO content, and let's just start jumping into this. Now, like I mentioned earlier, I am someone who does not have a whole lot of gold apples. I think I have 40 or so right now because I spent most of them on the last lotto for Christmas and a lot of them for Tugunska Sanctuary, and so I don't really have a whole lot. So for me and others that might also be feeling the effects of no apples, you're probably going to want to skip the first league. The reason is the drops aren't as good. As you can see right here, you're only getting 3 of each material, but if you move over to second and third league, you're getting 3 and 4. Same thing for the third league over here. You're getting 3 and 4 for each of the materials. So it is better to probably wait if you're hurting for apples for second and third league, which these rotate about every 4 to 5 days. It's going to be a day earlier because ours is on the 15th, not starting on the 16th. But yeah, you just wait for this one to kind of pass. You could still use your natural AP to farm the 90+. I just wouldn't advise going super hard on apples because you want to save those to really go hard when the nodes are dropping, you know, better rewards. But if you do have, say, 80, 90, 100 gold apples or even more, you're absolutely fine to just start farming these because the nodes themselves are still very good. They are still giving you very powerful rewards. It's just if you need to get more bang for your buck, you wait for second and third league. Now, if you are going to be farming this, again, not talking about buster farming because obviously that you just beat these up. You don't care that it's a 1, 2, 3 node. But if you're not going to be buster farming, one of the things you can do is pretty much bring any decent enough servant that can get their NP running with the 30% starting charge CE that they're going to give us, and you can obliterate this guy. I mean, you don't even need a single target dedicated servant to chunk a 40k enemy. You could bring an AoE assassin. You could do this with semi-Ramis. You could bring Spartacus, I imagine, with 1 or 2 command cards and probably still clear this guy. It's not all that tough because if you have a decent art servant with say a 30 to 50% battery, especially your Space Ishtars and Summer Kamas, they will refund 100% of their NP back on this, but they'll get within range that their 50% battery will carry them for this third wave over here, and then you're absolutely fine. You don't care how much you refund on this one, because now you're done. When it's wave 3, you're already done with the node, and they should be able to deal with this enemy. They are 182k HP, but that's not all that much, especially for, say, someone like Summer Kama that can get a little bit of extra damage with the Charm debuff activating her power mod, or also using, I believe it's the third skill, to get additional damage on her NP if you get any of her face cards. So you can do that. Obviously, if you want to go look at Martha's, her traits, her alignments and everything, you could try to bring somebody with the power mod. But if you have a decent art servant, they will be able to get within that range for their battery. Now, 30% is really going to probably depend on how good that servant is. Like, I have experience using Summer Masashi for stuff like this, and she'll get in within range of, say, 70 to 80%, depending on the enemy servant type, because enemy class does affect how much you're refunding back. She'll get in that range, but obviously no battery means she wouldn't really work for this unless you're going to plug suit in another servant. But if you're doing the strategy, you're probably going to be plug suiting in the other Castoria, if that makes sense. You'll probably start off with your person to take out this enemy, your Looper, and then Castoria. Castoria will dump all of her buffs onto your main Looper. You'll plug suit in the other Castoria, give the rest of the buffs. That'll put your main Looper at 100%, and your other Looper, the person that's going to take care of wave 1, at least 60%, because Castoria's charisma individually gives you 30%. You have 2 of them. Now you just need to find 40% more battery. But if you give them the Lotto currency CE, they'll get another 30% at base without max limit breaking it, and then you only need to find 10%. So even if they don't have a battery, you can just give them their append skills first unlock without having to even level it up any, because the initial unlock for that skill gives you 10%. Bada boom, bada bing, you've got that servant, even without a battery, up to 100% of their NP. So it shouldn't be all that difficult, since anybody with their initial append skill unlocked can take care of this guy. And again, 40k is really nothing. I only brought up, say, Summer Masashi to give you an example of someone with a lot of refund being able to get into that 70 to 80% range. But realistically, you're probably going to want to find somebody with that 40 to 50% battery, because they're probably not going to get up that high, because Summer Masashi just has a lot of refund, right? Like, she's one of the people that has some of the higher refund with her second skill. So if you don't have somebody on that level with a 30 to 20% battery, you're going to be relying on your 50s. But again, that's just my strategy if you would like to take down the first wave, which again is fine. But if you're just really having trouble doing first league, or you're like me and your apples are a little bit more limited, you're going to want to focus the majority of your farming on second and third league, which, hey, would you look at that? These are going to be the ones that are up longer than, the first area, and they have the better drop, so that's fine. This one is super dummy easy. Realistically, any decent art servant should be able to get through this with a plug suit support, because again, like I mentioned, especially against casters, you should definitely be hitting around, at least at the worst, 50% refund, but it's more than likely going to be about 60 to 70% on your better loopers. And then, with their own battery, they should be able to refund on wave 2. And then you're probably going to need to plug suit somebody in. Now, for this one, because it's one enemy, but it's a caster, they're probably going to hit around that 30 to 40% range. So you're probably going to want to plug suit in someone like Oberon if you do have him, which I am appreciative that they brought him back before this event, because you might have had a chance to grab him. So if you have an arts unit, they can probably just brute force their way through this with double Castoria plus Oberon. They will just get enough refund because they're casters. Now, if you don't have Oberon, you're probably going to need to do what we did for this first league over here, except you're going to need to get a bit stronger of a unit, because you can still use, say, your art servant to loop back about, at worst case, 50% of their battery, and, use their own self battery so they can loop this third node over here. But this one, you're going to need a pretty strong guy to take this one out. And people that I think would be very strong would be somebody like Kentucky Rider, Kentucky Berserker, Kets, Ozymandias. People like that should really be able to take this down with no fuss, no muss, nothing along those lines. And they don't require you to unlock your append skill, because again, from double Castoria, they'll be getting the 60% battery, and then they have the 30% event CE, and then they all have massive batteries. I mean, Cats has a 30, Ozzy has a 20, both the Kitokis have a 50, so they will all be more than fine in getting their NP to be able to chunk this large enemy over here. But, you know, I understand not maybe having Kentoki, Ozzy, Kets, they're 5 stars, maybe you don't have them. But Kentoki Rider, if you've been playing for a decent amount of time, you probably do have, but obviously we have more and more newer players coming in every single day. So at that point, you're just going to want to try to find the best rider that you have or the best berserker that you have that is a single target, because they'll be super effective. And again, even if you don't have somebody with a battery like, say, Quetzalcoatl, you can just unlock the Repent skill that gives you 10%, CE gives you 30%, double Castoria gives you 60%, that's 100%. Now, if you don't have Castoria and you also don't have Coin Sky to Buster Farm these things, you're going to be in a big pickle with this one. This one might be a little bit more difficult. You're probably going to need to get creative with, say, a Chen Gong strategy, which is what I believe I did for the second one over on JP. And that is going to require you to just throw batteries at them. Now, it's not going to be that bad because these are casters. You get some pretty decent refund, but you're going to need to have people like a Waver, a Reigns. You're going to need to have like a Nero Bride because you're just going to need to pump up his numbers. Thankfully, you can bring a friend Castoria, so that'll help out your refunding a little bit, and that gives you 50% battery. Chen Gong has his own 10% battery as well, but, you know, with your own support, so you have to bring, say if you have to bring someone like Reigns, who's not really the best offensive support unit, you might have to go into, say, unlock his Append skill so you don't have to initially use his 10% battery that's on his defensive skill, if you're going to be doing something along those lines. You can also try to do, say, raw NP farming, but that's going to be pretty difficult as well, because that's going to require you to have people like, say, Drake, who just have big battery. You unlock her Append skill, even with the 30%, that 50% battery, the 20% Append skill, and the 30% CE will allow her to fire her NP on one of these nodes. But then you got to find another guy to chuck wave 1 and wave 2. But it's not impossible, right? So you had a setup of, say, Drake to take out wave 3, you have Kentoki, Rider, or Berserker for wave 2, and then realistically, again, even someone like Spartacus can probably take out wave 1, especially even if he's off a little bit, you could just use a face card or 2, especially because you'll have 2 extra face cards, 2 extra enemies, so shouldn't be that big of a deal. So it's not impossible to get by if you don't have any of the meta supports, it's just going to be a little bit more rough. And then obviously for Quick, it'll also be a little bit more rough because their refund's not quite as good. And we don't really have, say, people like Rikyu out right now, who is one of the better Quick loopers. Now, it might not be impossible for Quick to be able to get this done if you have, say, Oberon double Scotty, because say they have their own 50%, 30% battery, it's probably going to need to be a 50% with Quick, let's be honest, even though these are casters. I imagine they could still get in that ballpark of that 49% to 50% range. With their own 50% battery, they can get back to 100% here, but then it's really rough if they're going to get 30% off a single enemy. I think that is pretty impossible. I don't really believe that's going to be a thing. If you're going to be doing quick farming, you might just have to have a guy with a big battery and, say, a super scope or a K-scope with their Append skill, because you might just need that free initial NP so you don't have to waste, say, one of Scotty's, 50% batteries. But I don't think it's impossible to get done. It might just be a very specific Quick servant who's on the tip of my tongue. I can't really remember their name as of right now, but if they are a really high refunding Quick unit or their NP levels are really high, so their overcharge is just on point, maybe you could get this done, but I don't want to get your hopes up. And I definitely think you probably have to have someone like Oberon to give you that extra 70%, because you're going to be reeling after going on this one right here. I'm assuming you're going to have to use one of your Scotties or their own self battery, and God forbid you have a Quick servant without a battery. It's probably not going to be doable, but don't want to say it's impossible. I think it is possible. I might test it out myself when this node does come out. I might try to find a way to get it done for the Quick enjoyers in the audience, but don't hold your breath for that one. Then finally, there's a third league. This one is kind of the inverse of the ones that we've been doing. If you're going to be bringing, say, any of your arts units, they can get a free loop off on this one. They can probably loop 100% if they're decent enough. Even if you want to bring someone like, say, Summer Masashi we talked about earlier, she could probably get 100% off of this, and then you could use her again to loop this one. Because, again, if she has 100%, who cares? If she's going to be looping this right here, you don't care about the refund because now the node is over. So realistically, you could do this with like any decent art servant, especially even if they're not the best looper. Say they have a battery, you can probably just, oh, well, I only got 60% back, but I'll just click my Space Ishtar's battery, bada boom, bada bing. She's ready to go for wave 3. And then here, it's just this dilemma of needing, say, a strong rider or a berserker to get this guy defeated, but it's way easier because it's a berserker. Any good single target will be able to take this guy out because it's a berserker. They're weak to literally everybody. So if you have Nero Bride, I even assume, could probably get this one done. She could probably do the 131k. And even if yours is NP1, low investment, maybe you don't even have attack foes into her for some reason. You haven't even got her leveled up from level 80 to 90. With face cards, this should be doable to take out. Like, you should be fine. And keep in mind, those single targets are still also getting the attack buffs from Castoria because, you know, you're probably going to open up with your Looper 1, your single target, and then your Castoria, who will drop her buffs on your main Looper, plugs it in the other Castoria. So they'll still have 2 attack buffs. And God forbid if you're using arts and you do enough arts chains that you can also fire Castoria's NP, that's an additional 30 to 50% attack, depending on their NP level, of course, but you should be absolutely fine on this one. This one doesn't seem all that difficult. Again, could be a little bit more on the hard side if you don't have, say, a Castoria or Koyanskaya to kind of easily get this done. So you're in Scotty meta, might be a little bit more difficult, but again, you could do the strategy for the other node, except it might be a bit easier because instead of relying on the refund for this first node going into the third node, you can just do it in inverse. Because there's 3 enemies, you're going to be looking pretty nice. You're going to be sitting pretty with your refund, and then you can just use their NP again for wave 3. You just bring a single target as well. Although, again, if you're going to be doing the plug suit thing for, say, Oberon, if you need extra damage or extra NP refund, that means you can't really do the strategy with a single target. And the single target doesn't work as well with Scotty because Scotty doesn't give everybody NP on their first skill like, say, Castoria does. So might be a little finicky, probably still doable if you just have a good looper. Say you have a Dante's or something. I think it's also a little bit rough because it's not super Chen Gong friendly. These enemies aren't so large that I would say it's impossible to kill them with Chen Gong, but the fact that it's 3 riders, that it's a single berserker, does not look very good for the prospects of doing Chen Gong farming, especially because there's another large rider right there. So go at your own discretion if you want to make it work with Chen Gong. Maybe if you have a 120 Chen Gong, you can just do the Lord's work out there. If you're that guy, maybe it'll get done. If you do get it done, you know, tweet it at me or something. I'd love to see it. It'd probably be very funny, but that's essentially the guide for just the lotteries themselves. If you want to see what they actually drop, it's some really good stuff. There's no wonder that everybody's so excited for this because you're getting bones, proofs, bullets. Those are all very good drops that you're supposed to get. And if you're newer and you don't know why this is sectioned off into 1 through 10 and then 11, mainly the difference is once you start getting into 11 and on, you're not getting any more silver or gold apples, which does mean if you're like me, you might want to open those first 10 boxes a little early so you can gain access to the additional silver and gold apples over here. Also, the first 10 boxes all have different little rewards, so you can get the damage CE over here if you're planning on doing the challenge quest. I highly recommend getting this before doing those because getting the extra damage will make it a lot easier. You're going to get a lore, and then you're going to get some of the gold foes, which is very nice. But that's pretty much it for the lotto information. Now we're just more talking about some of the free goodies and updates that we're getting with this. And one of them is going to be a very, very strong buff for Tesla over here, where he's going to increase debuff success rate and, more importantly, the buff success rate, which for him enables his skill too, which gives him like the NP damage and everything that pretty much guarantees his buffs. It's one of the same reasons why, say, Ozymandias is really good. Sure, he can increase the party's buff success rate, but for Ozymandias in particular, it turns on his Imperial privilege, which makes him a lot stronger because he now has a guaranteed 44% attack and defense buff. For Tesla, it now turns on his big damage skill and makes it guaranteed. Plus, if he fires his NP, he's almost guaranteed to stun the enemy, which, you know, that does kind of take into account, you know, their own debuff success rate and all that good stuff. And defense against debuffs and debuff immunity, all that good stuff, but it's really good. It makes him a lot better in challenge quests because you can pretty much get a guaranteed stun the turn you use this, but you also can turn on his second skill, which gives him a ton of damage, right? It makes Tesla not only really neat going into CQs, but it also makes him a really strong farmer, and he will also be going up on rate up. So do make sure that if you do want to get him, take note that he will be on the first initial banner, and he is quite good. I know there's a lot of very good servants that are coming out this year, but if you do have the spare Saint Quartz and you do like Tesla or you think he's good enough, I will tell you that he is good enough to go for it. Now, Edison over here, his is interesting, right? Edison is getting close to being one of these more free-to-play, friendly type servants, like a free-to-play support, like say Helena or something, because giving the NP gauge every single turn and the NP damage is nice generic support. What team comp does not want to have extra NP every single turn and just free NP damage? You know, those are the most generic things you can give. The only person who doesn't really care about the NP damage is what, like Super Orion, Chi Wong, you know, these actual face card damaging servants, but they aren't really the norm. They are definitely the exception, and they lowered the skill cooldown. So essentially the uptime is halved, right? So it's up for 5 turns, down for 5 turns, which is really, really nice. He also still gives you, say, the NP overcharge stages, which is pretty much good with most supports. I mean, with someone like Castoria, you're getting Solemn Defense. With Merlin and Proto Merlin, who will come out later, you're getting more stars. I mean, I know Scotty's a little bit of a meme, but her overcharge is damage cut, so that might mean something, right? That could be a little bit helpful if you want to bring her there. It's just nice. I mean, even the Tamamos, both the original Tamamo and, well, I guess not Tamamo, but Koyan Sky, you know, quote unquote, not Tamamo. Both of them give NP to the entire party on their overcharge. So now you're getting even more refund back. It's just really nice. He's on the cusp of being this really good, insane free-to-play guy that you can bring at kind of like, again, like Helena, which it's kind of fitting because they're in a bunch of story stuff together. So I think that'd be kind of funny if they were both known as the free-to-play friendlier supports that you could use. But something I think he needs is something more along the line of, say, Caskill's buff, where he gives the party immediate NP, but more importantly, gives himself NP as well, so you can start getting the NPs going, because they have very good support NPs, you know. And for Caskill, it's bombing a bunch of stars and, you know, giving you crit damage, defense, all that good stuff. And then for Edison, you know, it's like the overcharge and all the other stuff that he does on the Hollywood NP, basically. So I think he's getting close, just not like that insane yet, but he is getting a lot better. Then we move into the CEs that we're going to have. This is the one you're going to be using if you want to be doing the lotto farming. As you can see, yeah, not lying. You get 30% NP, 50% whenever you maximum break it. Don't think it's worth, you know, taking to level 100 or anything. I don't think it's that insane. One, it's a split CE, so you're not getting, you know, that much attack, which I've said this before and I'll say it again. Getting 2k attack goes a lot further than getting 2k HP, so you really want to prioritize those CEs. Or even the rare ones like Black Grill that give you 2400 attack. You really want to go after those. But it's not bad, you know, if you're more on the free-to-play side or you're more newer, you can use it in some of your arts comps, you know, getting the additional, essentially 35% crit damage on your arts cards, and then, you know, just getting free 15% crit damage. That's not all that bad. Like, you know, that's fine. It's okay. This one over here is just, again, it's just the CQCE. You get extra damage during the event, and then, oh, you have like guts on it. So this stuff is nice and more generic. These are starting to get a little bit better. Some of the past challenge quest CEs that we get for these, you know, big Gilfest, Nerofest, all these things, sometimes are a little bit mid, but this one at least has very decent generic effects. Everybody would like extra NP gain. Everybody else would like to do some nice free damage. You know, that's not bad. And then the guts is just to help you out in the CQs and essentially giving you an extra life, because the CQs are a bit difficult. You know, they're going to be kind of annoying with some of their mechanics, but make sure you get this one max limit broken before you start jumping in there. It'll make your life a lot easier. Then we move on to the command codes over here. This one I think is just good. Again, same effects on the CE over here that they just slapped on a command code. I love it when we get these. There's really no gimmick or anything to it. You can just put this on any servant that you like. You could also put it on, say, a looping servant that you like that maybe doesn't have the highest refund abilities, and so whenever you find this on one of their cards, you can go like, oh, I can put that in front of the NP, get a little bit of extra damage, and get a little bit of extra refund on this NP that I'm about to fire, and it's just kind of nice. But you're realistically just going to slap this on a servant that you use pretty often because generically good effects, and you just be like, oh, cool, extra NP damage and NP gain. You're probably still going to use it before you fire an NP, but just nice. You know, it also has some farming utility if you care about that sort of thing, but it's just good in general. This one I think is fine, I suppose. It's not the most broken thing, but it's not bad by any stretch of the imagination. You know, getting 2 free stars, I mean, you could put that on your arts cards. I know everybody does that. They put the command codes that drop stars on the arts cards. It's like, hey, look, my arts card is a quick card now. Which I'm not making fun of, you know. It's something that I do sometimes just because I think it's funny. But removing the latest attack buff on an enemy is not bad. You know, how often will that come up? Fairly commonly, I would say. A lot of different bosses give themselves attack buffs. It's just a lot of the times moving forward, these type of buffs will either get categorized as those different circles, like the orange circle things, and they're probably going to be unremovable, which makes some of these command codes not as good, but still, you can get some nice usage out of it. I mean, I was doing the Salieri boss fight in yesterday's video, actually, and if you slap this on one of your guys, it can at least start mitigating the attack buffs that he has. You know, there's still going to be memorial quests where these gimmicks do come into play, and some of these might be really good. So if you're wanting to save it for one of those potential fights, this might actually save and help you out. And then finally, there's this one. You're just going to put this on an arts card, get free 10% crit damage. It's nice. I might also consider putting this on some of your Buster servants that maybe only have 1 arts card, or when I was doing the runs on the Salieri boss fight where I was really trying to not use BB and I was using Melt for the most part. That's not the one that got uploaded. Those were the failed attempts because she only has 1 arts card. But slapping this on, say, someone like Melt who only has the 1 arts card and you really want to get crits on that for big, fat NP refund, you could do that as well. But probably just throw it on one of your art servants and call it a day. Or you could put it on someone like Castoria if you really think DPS Castoria is that funny. That might be something that might be worth doing if you want to be a little hilarious. And finally, I do want to bring up that we are going to be getting a Gil rate up. I know Gilgamesh is a lot of people's favorite character. He's my favorite character. He's really good. He's one of those servants that I don't think they'll ever let be too bad because he's one of the faces of the Fate franchise. Much like how Artoria, I don't think will always, or any time, be really considered bad. I don't think Gilgamesh will really be bad because as just icons for Fate and as very recognizable characters, they probably want them to be good. So around what, it's like a year and 6 months-ish, like a year and some change, we should be getting the buff to his first skill that gives him extra NP damage. So now he just is starting to unironically do really good damage as an AoE, even without the Enema Elish power mod going against servants. So he becomes pretty strong, more Oberon compliant if that's something that tickles your pickle. So he becomes even better if you want to use him as a looper or as a finisher for a boss fight. If you want to bring in Oberon and slap on that third skill, he'll probably just obliterate the enemy outright. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the event. Again, didn't really talk about the challenge quest because we are already, what, like 25 minutes into this video, something along those lines. So I don't want to make this video any longer than I have to. I will probably do individual videos as the CQs come out, kind of beating them myself and explaining the gimmicks, and so that way you guys can see me, a big dummy, beat the fights, and if a big dummy like me can beat them, then you can definitely beat them, all right? So, you know, that's just something to take to heart, you know, be inspired by that, I suppose. But with that being said, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Again, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe on the video, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Peace, late guys.